I never cried at a movie. I never paused for sunsets. And I certainly never had time for the theater. Life was always about results, profit margins, closing deals, and booking the next flight. I had built my tech company from a second-hand laptop and a rented storage unit into a multi-million-dollar empire. I was used to control, of numbers, of time, of people. But nothing could have prepared me for what I felt that night, the moment the curtain rose and she stepped into the light. It was a Friday evening when everything shifted. I had just closed the deal of the quarter, another merger, another headline, and my buddies insisted we celebrate. But instead of the usual champagne-soaked dinner or a weekend on someone's yacht, they handed me a single black envelope. No work. No phones. Just go, one of them said. You need culture, man. Inside was a ticket to the Glass Room, an exclusive one-night-only theatrical performance at the Wexley Theatre, a place so private you couldn't just buy your way in. I laughed it off, tossed it onto my desk, and went back to my usual routine of spreadsheets and client calls. But around 6 p.m., something tugged at me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was just tired of seeing my own reflection in mirrored conference rooms. I told my assistant to cancel dinner, threw on a tailored jacket, and headed to the Wexley. I arrived just before curtain call. The lobby buzzed with quiet sophistication, men in tuxedos, women in flowing silk, the scent of perfume and old books. I felt oddly out of place, like a wolf in a library. But then the lights dimmed, the crowd hushed, and the red curtains began to pull apart. She stepped onto the stage, and the world shifted. Her name, though I didn't know it then, was Elise Marin. She wore a simple cream dress, nothing flashy, but her presence drew every molecule of attention in the room. Her voice carried like a hymn. Not loud. Just, pure. Deliberate. Each word she spoke seemed to bypass my brain and settle somewhere deep in my chest. I was supposed to be analyzing the set design, admiring the script, being intellectual about the whole thing. But I didn't even register the plot. I only watched her. I only heard her. And for the first time in over a decade, I forgot to check my phone. After the final bow, the audience leapt to their feet in a standing ovation. I clapped, too, but I felt hollow. It was over too soon. I wanted more, not of the play, but of her. She disappeared behind the curtain. And that's when something clicked in me, something unfamiliar, unsettling. I wanted to know her. Not in the way a man of my wealth might pursue a model at an afterparty or a tech influencer at a summit. This wasn't about conquest. It was about understanding what I had just felt, why my heart had thundered in silence, why I was still sitting there as the crowd filtered out, staring at the empty stage like a fool. I went home restless. I couldn't sleep. I looked her up online, but nothing came up under Elise Marin. I even called the Wexley box office the next morning, asking for a program copy. The receptionist sounded suspicious. We don't release actor details to the public, she said. Sorry. But I wasn't going to stop there. I had contacts. Resources. The benefit of being obscenely wealthy is that doors open without you asking twice. That weekend, I called my friend Carter, who funds half the city's cultural projects. Do me a favor, I said, and find out who played the lead in the Glass Room last night. He was skeptical. You. Going after an actress. It's not like that, I said quietly. He didn't push. 3 hours later, he called me back. Her name's Elise Marin, all right. But that's a stage name. Real name's Elise Moreno. Trained in London. New to New York. Doesn't have much of a digital footprint. That performance was her breakout. That was all I needed. I suddenly had an image of her somewhere alone in this massive city, folding up her costume, riding the subway home, completely unaware that someone had just walked into her orbit and couldn't get out. The next day, I showed up at the Wexley with a bouquet of white tulips and asked if I could leave them for her. The receptionist squinted at me. You again. I smiled politely. Just a gift from someone who really appreciated the performance. She accepted the flowers and waved me off. But I wasn't going to leave it at that. No. Something about this woman had unhinged the door to a part of me I hadn't touched in years. A part that remembered how to feel, how to wonder. So I asked Carter to connect me to someone in the director's circle, He managed to set up a casual introduction at an upcoming charity gala the following Thursday, where, apparently, Elise had been invited as a guest. The night came quickly. I arrived in a sleek charcoal suit, feeling more like a nervous schoolboy than a millionaire CEO. The ballroom buzzed with chatter and jazz music, but I scanned for her like a lifeline. Then I saw her. Across the room, in a navy dress that caught the light like moonlight on water. Laughing politely with an older woman. Her hair swept up, exposing a delicate neck. She looked exactly the same, and completely different, off stage. I took a breath and started walking toward her. But just as I reached for a glass of champagne to steady my nerves, someone stepped in front of me. A tall man. Mid-30s. Confident smile. He placed a hand lightly on Elise's back and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. She turned toward him with a familiar softness, one I didn't expect to see. My heart dropped. Was I already too late? I stood there frozen, my champagne glass trembling just slightly in my hand. Elise smiled at the men beside her, her eyes squinting with genuine amusement, as I had watched come alive on stage just days earlier. And that same light, that same presence, now belonged to someone else. Or at least, it seemed to. I watched them for a moment too long. I must have looked like a ghost, hovering awkwardly at the edge of the gala, caught between confidence and something unfamiliar, vulnerability. The man leaned in again. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw her nod politely, then excuse herself. She walked toward the far end of the room, weaving between guests with the elegance of someone who'd grown used to navigating crowds without being consumed by them. And for a few seconds, she was alone. I downed the rest of my drink, inhaled slowly, and walked toward her like I had every right to. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little lower than I intended. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I saw the glass room the other night. You were extraordinary." She turned slowly, surprised. Up close, her eyes were even more vivid, a shade between hazel and green, flickering under the chandelier light. Her expression softened, polite but distant. "Thank you," she said, offering a small smile. "That was a very special night for me." "I can imagine," I replied. "You made it unforgettable." "I'm not normally a theater guy, but I couldn't take my eyes off your performance." She tilted her head slightly. "That's kind of you to say. I'm glad it meant something to you." Something about her phrasing struck me, gentle, formal, but not cold. She wasn't brushing me off. She was guarded. "I'm Nathan, by the way." "Nathan Hale." I extended a hand. "Elise," she said, shaking it lightly. "Elise Marin or Elise Moreno?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You've done your homework." I was curious, I admitted. Curious enough to send flowers to the Wexley. "Did you get them?" She hesitated. "I did." That was thoughtful. I noticed she didn't say thank you. And in that pause, I realized something important. Elise wasn't flattered. She was wary. And in hindsight, maybe showing up at her workplace and sending flowers without ever speaking to her first wasn't the most subtle approach. "I'm not trying to come off strong," I said quickly. When I saw you on stage, it felt like I was watching someone who knew exactly who they were." "That's rare." She laughed softly at that, and it was a beautiful sound, less rehearsed than before. "That's funny. Most days I feel like I'm making it up as I go." I smiled. "Well, you're very convincing." She took a sip of her wine and glanced over her shoulder. The man from earlier was still deep in conversation with a couple near the fireplace, not even glancing our way. "Friend of yours?" I asked carefully. She followed my gaze, then looked back at me. "Oh. That's my director, Mason. We've worked together for a few years." "So not her boyfriend?" I felt ridiculous for how relieved I was. "Mason's got good taste in casting," I said, and she chuckled again. "That's what he tells himself." We talked for a few more minutes, about the show, about the city, about how the theater world is both impossibly small and endlessly vast. She was sharp, thoughtful, and careful with her words. Every time I thought she might warm up, she'd shift just slightly back into that poised version of herself, the one trained to handle attention. I'm guessing you're not usually at events like this, she asked at one point, almost teasing. I'm more of a boardroom than ballroom kind of guy, I admitted. Tonight's a bit of a detour. Well, welcome to the detour, she said, lifting her glass. We clinked glasses. And for a flicker of a moment, something passed between us, ease, recognition, or maybe just the shared strangeness of feeling out of place somewhere glamorous. But just as I was about to ask her for dinner, something simple, something real, Mason appeared beside her like a well-rehearsed stage entrance. There you are, he said warmly, placing a hand on her arm. Sorry, Elise. They need us over by the auction table. She nodded, turning to me. It was nice meeting you, Nathan. Likewise, I said, more disappointed than I expected. She walked away beside Mason, and I stood there feeling the strange sting of almost. I didn't even know what I was hoping for. A date. Her number. Something more than a polite conversation at a gala I hadn't wanted to attend in the first place. But I couldn't shake it, this pull toward her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was talented, though she was. But because something about her made me feel like a man who had never really listened to silence until he heard her speak in it. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about her pacing the stage barefoot in Act 3, trembling with emotion in the spotlight. I thought about the brief falter in her voice when she spoke about making it up as I go. I thought about the way she kept one eye on the door, even while smiling. She wasn't just performing on stage. She was performing here, too. But why? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I canceled a day of meetings. Instead, I asked Carter if he knew anyone at the Wexley who worked behind the scenes. I'll make a call, he said, sounding amused. You're really going after this, huh? It's not about going after her, I said. It's about understanding something I can't stop thinking about. 2 hours later, I had lunch with Julia, the assistant stage manager. A bright, fast-talking woman with no filter and a deep love for Earl Grey tea. Elise, she said when I brought up her name. She's a mystery even to us. Brilliant on stage, super private off it. Doesn't do social media. Doesn't date within the company. Keeps to herself. Has she been in New York long? About 8 months. Before that, she was in London. I think she had some kind of falling out with a big director there, but she never talks about it. You know theater people, always some kind of past trauma we're escaping. What about Mason? I asked. Is there something there? Julia shrugged. Mason's harmless. Big on image, though. Loves being the one who discovered Elise. But she's not interested in being anyone's project. She's ambitious, but on her own terms. I nodded, unsure what I was even doing. I wasn't collecting intelligence. I was chasing shadows. But something told me Elise had layers no script could explain. And I wasn't ready to let her story end at the gala. So I decided to write her a letter. No assistance. No phone calls. Just me, a pen, and the truth. I told her how much her performance moved me. How I hadn't stepped into a theater in years and now couldn't stop thinking about a single moment on stage. How I wasn't trying to impress her, only hoping to see her again, on her terms. I left the note with the receptionist at the Wexley. No flowers this time. No fanfare. Just a name. And a question. Would you meet me for coffee? Just once. Just us. I didn't know if she'd respond. But 3 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. I don't usually do this. But there's a cafe on 9th and Monroe. Tomorrow. Noon. Elise. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the screen. The curtain hadn't closed yet. It was just the beginning. The cafe on 9th and Monroe was small, almost invisible from the street. Tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore, it was the kind of place you'd only notice if you already knew it existed. When I arrived 5 minutes early, I felt out of place again. My watch cost more than most of the furniture. But I didn't care. This wasn't about appearance. It wasn't a business meeting or a date I had to win. It was something else. Something quieter, more fragile. I chose a corner table near the window, away from the entrance, and ordered 2 black coffees. I didn't know how she took hers, but it seemed safer than risking a syrupy guess. At exactly noon, Elise walked in. She wore a long gray coat and no makeup that I could see. Her hair was loose, windswept. She looked nothing like the woman on stage, or the elegant guest at the gala. And yet, something about her seemed even more captivating, more real. She saw me, hesitated for a second, then walked over. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," I echoed, standing to pull out her chair. She smiled faintly at the gesture, then sat. I returned to my seat, suddenly very aware of how warm my palms were. "I didn't think you'd text back," I said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But something about your note felt sincere. Most men don't lead with vulnerability. Especially not ones in your tax bracket." I laughed softly. "Fair enough." We sipped coffee in silence for a moment. The background hum of quiet conversation and jazz music filled the space between us. "So," she said at last, "what exactly are we doing here?" A blunt question. But I appreciated it. "I'm not sure," I said honestly. "All I know is that I saw you on stage, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't connected to work or money or outcomes. And I wanted to understand that feeling. I wanted to understand you." She didn't respond right away. She looked out the window, watching a man walk his dog across the street. "I get a lot of compliments after shows," she said finally. "Most are polite, rehearsed. Yours wasn't. But this," she gestured at the table, "this isn't part of the script either. And that scares me a little." "I get that," I said. "Trust doesn't come easy. Especially in this city." She studied me for a beat. "What are you running from, Nathan?" The question landed harder than I expected. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. "I guess I'm not running from something," I said slowly. "I'm realizing I've been standing still for years. Chasing numbers, building walls, collecting success like trophies, but none of it means much when you're alone at the top." Her expression softened slightly. "You sound like someone who's finally listening to the silence." I nodded. "And you sound like someone who's had to protect hers." We talked for over an hour. About nothing and everything. About growing up, her in Connecticut, me in Boston. About how she'd left a prestigious London theater company because a director tried to control her both on and off stage. "He said I was wasting my potential by turning down roles he handpicked for me," she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "But what he meant was, I wasn't doing what he wanted." "That's abuse of power," I said. "Plain and simple." She shrugged. "It's the industry. You learn to either bend or break. But you didn't bend." "No," she said quietly. I left. There was a strength in her honesty that I hadn't expected. She wasn't performing for me. She was choosing to be here, to let her guard down, even if just an inch. And that meant more to me than any polished conversation ever could. I told her about my parents, my father who died before I made my first million, my mother who still didn't understand what exactly I did. "Sometimes I think they'd be more proud if I'd become a teacher," I said. Elise smiled. "Mine wanted me to go into law. Theater was my rebellion." "Do they come to your shows?" "They did, once. Opening night of my first lead role. They left at intermission." I stared at her. "Seriously?" "They thought the story was too abstract. Said I should do something lighter next time. Like a musical." I shook my head. "People fear what they don't understand." She looked at me then, really looked at me. As if she was still trying to figure out whether I was real. "Why are you really here, Nathan?" she asked. I thought for a long moment before answering. "Because when I saw you up there, I realized I'd spent my life watching the wrong stage." She blinked, not expecting that. I didn't say it to impress her. I said it because it was true. "I'm not asking for anything," I added. "No promises. No expectations. I'd like to know you. Not the actress. Not the woman in the gown at the gala. Just Elise." She sat back in her chair and exhaled. "That's not something many people ask for," she said. "I know. We finished our coffee and walked outside together. The street was quieter now, the city pausing between lunch and evening. She stopped near the curb, wrapping her coat tighter. "I'll be honest with you," she said. "I don't date. I haven't in a while. My work is complicated. My life is messy. And I've built a very careful balance that I don't let many people into." I nodded. "I'm not trying to break it. I just want to walk beside it, if you'll let me." She looked down, then up. Her eyes locked with mine, steady and searching. "I have rehearsals this week. But there's a park near 73rd. I go there early Sunday mornings. It's quiet. No tourists. Just trees, birds, and old women walking their dogs." I smiled. "Sounds perfect. Meet me there," she said. "If you want. I'll be there." She nodded once, then turned and walked away. And just like that, my entire world tilted a little more. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know if she'd ever let me all the way in. But I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just a moment. She was the beginning of something I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Sunday mornings in the city carry a kind of softness that's hard to describe. The sidewalks are quieter. The traffic is sparse. Even the light feels less rushed, as if the sun itself is reluctant to begin another busy week. I arrived at the park near 73rd just before 8 a.m., not wanting to be late. I hadn't asked what time she'd be there, but something told me she was the kind of person who valued presence over punctuality. The park wasn't large, just a modest stretch of green tucked between rows of brownstones. An old wrought iron fence surrounded it. Inside, paths curved through trees with thick, tangled branches, and a few benches sat in the shade, half covered in golden leaves. I found one near a sycamore tree and waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Doubt crept in slowly, like a fog. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe the last few days had felt more intense to me than they had to her. I was about to stand and leave when I saw her. She came around the bend in a navy peacoat and black leggings, her hair pulled into a loose braid. In one hand she held a paper bag from a nearby bakery. In the other, 2 steaming coffee cups. "You beat me," she said as she approached. "I was afraid I'd missed you." "No chance," she said, handing me a cup. "Black, no sugar, right?" I nodded, a little surprised. "You remembered." "I have a good memory," she said, sitting beside me. There was a light breeze, and the trees rustled gently above us. We sipped our coffee in silence for a while, the world around us muted, like we were tucked into a pocket of calm. "I like this place," I said finally. "It's where I come when I need to disappear." "Disappear?" She nodded. "The stage can be loud. So can life. But here, I don't have to be anyone." "I know what that feels like," I said. "Everyone thinks I've got everything figured out. Sometimes I believe it myself. But then there are these moments, like now, where I realize how much I've missed by being too busy building a life I'm not sure I even want." She glanced at me. "That's a heavy thing to admit. I guess I've been carrying it for a while." She unwrapped the bakery bag and handed me a warm croissant. "Here. Existential confessions require carbs." I laughed, accepting it. "You're full of surprises. You have no idea." We sat there eating, watching an older woman walk 2 dachshunds in matching sweaters. For a while, nothing was said. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was peaceful, honest. "Can I ask you something?" I said, wiping my hands on a napkin. "Sure. You said the theater's loud. But isn't it also your home?" She looked down at her coffee. "It used to be. But lately, it feels like I'm always performing. Even off stage. There's always someone watching. Critics. Directors. Audience members. It's like I don't belong to myself anymore. That's a hard way to live." "Yeah," she whispered. "It is." I turned slightly toward her. "I'm not trying to fix anything, Elise. I know I can't. But if there's one thing I've learned from being in rooms full of people who only want something from me, it's how much it means to find someone who doesn't." She looked at me again. This time her expression was softer, unguarded. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then. My last relationship ended because he couldn't tell the difference between the woman and the role. He fell in love with who I was on stage. Off stage, he didn't like that I had fears. Or flaws. Or days when I didn't want to be touched. I swallowed hard. That sounds painful. It was. But necessary. I had to choose myself, even if it meant being alone. I admire that. She smiled faintly. Most people just think it makes me difficult. Then I'm glad I'm not most people. We finished our coffee. The wind picked up slightly, and she tucked her hands into her coat sleeves. Do you ever feel like you're just now waking up? She asked. All the time, I said. Especially since meeting you. She raised an eyebrow. Is that a line? No, I said, shaking my head. It's a confession. A squirrel darted across the path. Somewhere behind us, a kid laughed. But in that moment, everything felt very still. She stood slowly. Walk with me. Anywhere, I replied. We walked through the winding paths of the park, side by side but not touching. She told me about her childhood, how she used to perform plays in the backyard with her sister, using cardboard boxes and old sheets. How her parents never really understood why she wanted to act, but tolerated it as a phase that never ended. I told her about my first business, how it failed miserably, and how I had to take a night job cleaning office buildings to keep going. She laughed when I told her about getting locked in a supply closet for 3 hours. You. Trapped in a janitor's closet, she teased. That's almost poetic. It was humbling. Good. You need a little more of that. I'm beginning to think you're right. We reached a small pond. Ducks paddled lazily across the water. Elise sat on the edge of a wooden railing, looking out. You know, she said, most people try to impress me with their ambition or charm. You just listen. I leaned on the railing beside her. Maybe because I've had everything but that. She looked at me, really looked, and something passed between us again, an understanding, an unspoken promise. I'm not ready for anything serious, she said suddenly. I'm not asking for serious. Just honest. She nodded. I can do that. A gust of wind lifted a few leaves into the air, spinning them like dancers on a stage. Do you want to come to the theater again? She asked. Not as a fan. Just someone sitting in the dark. I'd love that. I have a matinee this Wednesday. It's not a glamorous role, but it's raw. Real. Might not even be your thing. If it's you up there, it's my thing. She laughed, and this time, it wasn't cautious or measured. It was pure. Okay then, she said. Wednesday. I'll leave your name at the door. We walked back to the entrance of the park. Her phone buzzed, a reminder for rehearsal. She silenced it and looked at me with a touch of reluctance. Thank you for showing up, she said. Thank you for letting me. As she turned to go, I felt something shift again, not just between us, but in me. Like I was no longer watching life from behind the glass. I was stepping into it. Fully present. And just maybe, into the first real act of something lasting. Wednesday arrived faster than I expected. The days between our Sunday walk and today felt both like a blink and a slow burn. I'd caught myself replaying her laugh more than once, soft, unguarded, real. It had been a long time since something so simple took up space in my head like that. The matinee was scheduled for 2 p.m., and for once in my life, I cleared my calendar for something that didn't involve numbers or contracts. I turned off notifications, let my assistant know I'd be unreachable, and hailed a cab like a man on a mission. The theater was older, tucked into the edge of a block more known for wine bars and antique shops. It wasn't the grand venue from the gala night. No red carpets or flutes of champagne. Just a wooden door, a velvet rope, and the scent of dust and dreams. At the box office, I gave my name. Nathan Caldwell, I said. The attendant scanned the list, then handed me a single paper ticket. Second row, center, she said. Enjoy the performance. There was a moment of hesitation before I stepped inside. Not because I was nervous about seeing her on stage again, but because I suddenly understood that I wasn't just a spectator anymore. I was entering her world, one I didn't control, couldn't shape, couldn't buy. And somehow, that made it sacred. I took my seat as the house lights dimmed. The curtain rose slowly, revealing a minimalist set. The play was called No Rain Today, and I had no idea what to expect. Elisa's role wasn't the lead this time, but the moment she stepped into the scene, the atmosphere changed. She played a woman who'd been abandoned by her family, living in a cramped apartment above a laundromat. She had only a few scenes, but every line she delivered cut clean and deep. Her character was raw, frayed around the edges, nothing like the polished, captivating woman from that first performance I saw. And yet, she was even more stunning here. More honest. By the end of the show, my throat was tight, and I hadn't touched the bottled water in my hand. As the curtain fell, the modest crowd applauded warmly. I didn't stand, didn't cheer, I just watched her take her bow, head slightly lowered, humility in every motion. She disappeared backstage, and I sat still for a while, uncertain of the protocol. She hadn't mentioned meeting afterward, hadn't said where or when. So I waited. Eventually, I made my way to the lobby. An usher stood near the exit, and I asked if there was a stage door or cast exit nearby. Round the side, he said, pointing. Some folks wait there for autographs. When I got there, only 2 women were lingering with playbills and Sharpies. I stood back, trying not to hover. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The door finally creaked open, and a few cast members trickled out. And then, there she was. No makeup. Hair damp from a quick rinse. A canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She wore jeans and a faded hoodie that said, "Breathe through it." I caught her eye. She smiled. "You came," she said, walking over. "Wouldn't have missed it. You really stayed until the end." I didn't blink. She laughed. "It's not exactly glamorous. That's why it was perfect." We started walking down the street, not saying much at first. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. "You were incredible," I said. "I barely had 10 minutes of stage time. And yet, you said more with 10 minutes than most actors say in 2 hours." She didn't respond, but I saw the way her shoulders relaxed. She wasn't used to praise that didn't come with strings or critique. "Want to get some food?" she asked suddenly. "There's a place I go after shows. Nothing fancy. Lead the way." We ended up at a tiny Thai place just 2 blocks down. She ordered pad cew, I ordered green curry, and we split a pot of jasmine tea. The room smelled of lemongrass and chili, and I realized how far I'd come from the white linen restaurants and quiet deals I was used to. "Did you always want to act?" I asked. She nodded. "Since I was 7. I saw a local production of Peter Pan and came home devastated that the magic wasn't real. My mom told me that the magic was in the acting, in making people believe it. And from that moment on, I was hooked." "Your mom sounds wise." "She was," Elise said softly. "She passed away 5 years ago." I paused. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She never saw me take a lead role, but she came to every student performance. Sat in the front row even when it was just 10 folding chairs in a gym. She must have been proud. I hope so. The mood dipped into something more reflective, but not heavy. It felt safe here, like we could talk about the hard stuff without breaking under it. "And you?" she asked. "Was business always your plan?" "Not exactly. I wanted to build something, to prove I could. My father worked construction. He built homes. I build companies. It's not the same, but I like to think he'd understand." "And are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm getting there," I said. For the first time, I'm asking myself what happiness even means without the bottom line attached. She leaned back in her chair. "That's brave, you know." "I don't feel brave. I feel like I've been asleep for years and only now started waking up." Elise tilted her head. "Then let's keep you awake." We finished our meal and lingered outside, neither of us wanting to call it a night. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender, the city moving at its usual chaotic rhythm around us. I'm glad I came today, I said. Watching you up there, it felt like a window into who you really are. She turned to me, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she said, I want to show you something. She hailed a cab, and we climbed in. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. After about 20 minutes, we arrived at a brownstone in Brooklyn, aged, with ivy creeping along one side. She led me up the narrow staircase and unlocked a door on the third floor. This is where I write, she said, flicking on a small lamp. It was a single-room studio. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scripts, poetry, worn paperbacks. In one corner stood a small desk covered in notes and coffee rings. A cheap keyboard sat by the window. I thought actors didn't like writing, I said. She smiled. Most don't. But I have things I need to say that no director will ever cast me to say. So I write them here. I walked slowly around the room, taking it all in. It felt like her, quiet but intense, filled with pieces of thoughts left unfinished. On one shelf, I noticed a notebook with a ribbon bookmark. She saw me glance at it. Those are monologues, she said. For a play I'll probably never produce. Why not? Because it's too personal. Too raw. I'm not sure anyone would want to hear it. I would, I said gently. She looked at me then, and something unspoken passed between us again, like a string being pulled taut between two hearts that didn't quite know what to do with each other yet. You don't scare easily, do you? She asked. Not anymore. She walked over, pulled the notebook down, and handed it to me. Then read it. Not now. But when you're ready. I will. As I held it in my hands, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to believe until now. I wasn't just curious about Elise anymore. I was falling. And whether she knew it or not, she was pulling me deeper into a story I never expected to live. I didn't open the notebook that night. I brought it home and placed it gently on the kitchen counter, like you would with something fragile, something sacred. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I stared at it as if it might whisper to me first. But it didn't. Instead, I poured a drink, sat by the window, and just let the silence stretch. The city pulsed outside, but inside, it was still. I was still. That notebook felt like a key. But I wasn't sure if it opened a door into Elise, or into parts of myself I hadn't faced in years. I didn't sleep much. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I made coffee, turned my phone off, and sat at the kitchen table. I opened the notebook. Her handwriting was neat, unpretentious. On the first page, there was no title, just a line in bold, underlined. Things I never say out loud. And then it began. Monologues. Short, punchy, poetic. Raw. Some only a paragraph long. Others stretched across pages. It wasn't about characters. These were her. Pieces of Elise broken into language, wounds stitched with words. I wish I had the courage to be boring. To wake up next to someone and not feel like I had to impress them with clever lines or deep thoughts. Just breathe. Just be. I don't know how to do that. Sometimes I cry after curtain call. Not because the performance is over, but because I have to go back to being myself. And she feels like a stranger. When someone tells me I'm beautiful, I flinch. I want to ask them what they'd think of me with puffy eyes and no mascara, crying on the bathroom floor over a voicemail. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. Every entry pulled me closer, not just to her but to something honest in myself I'd long buried under suits and spreadsheets. This wasn't a woman playing a part. This was someone braver than anyone I'd ever met, someone choosing to be vulnerable, even if it meant being alone. And for some reason, she trusted me with this. I closed the notebook slowly, exhaled, and sat in the silence again, only this time, it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of her voice. Full of the truth. I wanted to see her. Needed to. Not to say anything profound, not to fix her. Just to show her she didn't have to be anyone else around me. I texted her around noon. Me, I read it. All of it. Me, and I'd still like to see you tonight. Just as you are. She didn't respond for over an hour, and I started second-guessing myself. Maybe it was too much. Maybe I should have kept my distance. But then. Elise, 8 p.m. Same bench in the park. My chest loosened with that single line. I didn't even bother trying to work the rest of the day. I walked around the city, wandered bookstores, turned off down side streets I'd never noticed before. I wanted to show up with nothing on my mind but her. The sun was just dipping beneath the skyline when I reached the park. She was already there, hood up, hands tucked in her coat. This time, no coffee. No croissants. Just her. I sat beside her, mirroring her silence. "Did it scare you?" she asked after a long pause. "No," I said. "It made me feel less alone." She blinked, surprised. "You." I've built walls for so long, I forgot what it's like to be seen. Reading that, it cracked something open. She looked straight ahead. "It's not a script. I didn't write it for applause. I know. And that's why it matters." Her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. "I don't let many people read that," she whispered. "I don't take that lightly." Another pause. Then. "When I was little, I thought being loved meant performing. Being charming. Useful. Memorable. I didn't realize until much later that love that needs to be earned isn't love at all. I felt that in my bones." "I understand," I said. "I've spent years impressing rooms full of people who couldn't care less about who I actually am. And I let them define my worth." We sat there, two people trained to be everything for everyone, finally letting go of the act. "I don't want to perform with you," she said. "Then don't. I don't want you to fall for a version of me that only exists on stage." "Elise," I said, turning to her fully, "I'm not falling for the actress. I'm falling for the woman who writes truth in the dark and doesn't run when it scares her." For the first time since I'd met her, her eyes filled with tears. She blinked quickly, trying to hide it, but I saw. "Damn it," she muttered, half laughing. "I didn't bring tissues." "Good," I smiled. "It means we're being real." She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. "What are we even doing, Nathan?" "Something rare," I said. "And maybe a little terrifying. But honest." She reached into her coat and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper. "This is a script I've been working on," she said. "A real one. I want to submit it to a workshop, but I keep talking myself out of it." "Why?" "Because if it fails, it's me failing. Not just a character. Not just a job. Me." I took the paper and held it between us. "Then let me read it. And when you're ready, I'll sit in the front row. Whether it's perfect or not." She didn't say anything. But her hand reached for mine. Just for a moment. And then she let go. Later that night, I walked her to her apartment. She didn't invite me in. I didn't ask. That wasn't what this was about. Not yet. We stood at her door, and I said quietly, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For showing me something real. For not pretending. You're the first man I've met in a long time who didn't try to fix me." "I wouldn't dare," I said. "You're not broken." She smiled softly, and then, without warning, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. Not a dramatic movie kiss. Not a signal or a seduction. Just a gesture. Gentle. Earnest. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Elise." She closed the door. And I stood there in the hallway for a while, hand still tingling from where she'd touched mine, heart doing something unfamiliar, something hopeful. Back home, I opened her new script and read the first page. It began with a stage direction. Lights up on a woman sitting alone in a room. She's not waiting. She's choosing. I read that line again and again. I knew then. This wasn't just a romance. This was a beginning. There's a moment in every performance, right before the curtain rises, when everything goes still. The lights dim, the crowd hushes, and the stage holds its breath. It's that fragile, flickering space between the unknown and what's about to begin. That's exactly what it felt like the night Elise's play debuted. 2 months had passed since that kiss on the cheek, 2 months of long walks, scribbled notes passed at her rehearsals, dinners filled with laughter and pauses deep enough to hide a lifetime of meaning. We still hadn't labeled what we were. There were no declarations, no definitive titles. Just something growing quietly between us, steady, genuine. But this play, her play, was different. It wasn't just another show. It was the first story she wrote entirely from her soul. And tonight, for the first time, it was going to be seen by the world. And by me. I sat in the front row. Right in the center. A copy of the script rested in my coat pocket, the corners dog-eared, the final line underlined more than once. We don't choose how the story starts, but we get to choose what we become by the end. That line had haunted me for weeks. Because for the first time, I realized I'd been living like a man locked inside the first chapter, terrified to turn the page. Until Elise. The theater was smaller than I expected, intimate. The crowd was a mix of indie directors, friends of cast members, local artists, and theater lovers curious enough to attend a debut from a newcomer. And yet, as the lights dimmed, I swear it felt like she was performing just for me. The play opened with a woman sitting in silence on a plain wooden chair. The entire set was minimal. No flashy backdrops, no lighting tricks. Just words. Movement. Emotion. Elise appeared halfway through Act 1. She didn't announce herself with fanfare. She just walked on stage, quietly, like a thought that entered the room uninvited but impossible to ignore. Her character, a painter who had lost her ability to see color, spoke in fragmented lines. A woman trying to understand how she could feel so deeply and yet not feel seen. And somehow, in that small room, with only a few dozen people watching, she made the world stop. There was a moment, Act 2, Scene 4, where her character spoke to an empty canvas. They say love makes you brave. But what if it just makes you visible? What if it strips away the costumes you wear and leaves you standing in front of someone, completely undone? That line hit me like a punch to the chest. Because that's what she had done to me. Slowly, without asking permission, she'd peeled away my layers, my suits, my titles, my armor, and showed me what it meant to be truly seen. And I hadn't looked away. Neither had she. When the final scene ended, there was a long, stunned silence. Then applause. Roaring, sustained, rising. She stepped forward for her bow, blinking back tears she hadn't expected. The director joined her, followed by the rest of the small cast. People were standing. Some were crying. And I was just frozen. Because I had never loved someone more than I did in that moment. After the crowd filtered out and the lobby buzzed with praise, I waited by the side door, just like the first time. This time, though, I didn't feel like an outsider peering into her world. I felt like I belonged to it. The door opened. Elise stepped out in jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, still glowing from adrenaline. Her hair was tied up messily, and her cheeks were flushed. When she saw me, she stopped walking. Just smiled. "You were there," she said softly. "Front row," I replied. "Just like I promised." She looked down for a second, then back at me. I was terrified. "I thought you might see too much of me tonight." "I saw all of you. And I've never been more certain about anything in my life." She didn't respond with words. She just walked forward and wrapped her arms around me, tight, sure, like someone letting go of years of holding back. We stood like that for a while. No applause. No stage lights. Just the two of us, somewhere between a closing scene and the start of something real. Later, we walked back to her apartment. The city was quieter now, the night air cool and fresh. "I got an email today," she said, as we reached her building. "From a director who saw the show." My chest tightened. Good news. He wants to meet. Talk about producing it at a bigger venue. Even, off-Broadway, possibly. That's amazing, Elise. It is. But it means things might get complicated. What do you mean? She looked up at me, honest and vulnerable. It means I'll be busy. Traveling. Rehearsing. Maybe even moving, if things take off. I took a breath. And then I smiled. "Elise," I said gently, "I didn't fall in love with you because I wanted to keep you. I fell in love with you because you made me want to grow. I want you to have everything. Everything you've worked for. Everything you've dreamed of. Her eyes welled up. Even if it means we don't get a perfect ending. I stepped closer. No such thing as perfect endings. But we can have a real one. Or better yet, a real beginning. Whatever shape it takes. She laughed through the tears. You sound like one of my monologues. Guess I've been reading too much of your work. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we stood there in the doorway. I don't know where this will go, she whispered. Me neither. But we're here. And that's enough. For now. I said. Yeah. It's everything. 6 months later, Elise's play opened in a theater 3 times the size of that first one. The reviews were glowing. Offers came in. New scripts. A fellowship. She began teaching part-time at a creative arts center. Her world kept growing. And so did mine. I stepped down from 2 of my companies. I started investing in community spaces, small theaters, youth programs. I even took a writing class. Not because I wanted to be a writer, but because I wanted to understand the language that had brought me to her. We didn't move in together. Not yet. But we met every Sunday morning at the same bench in the park. Sometimes we brought coffee. Sometimes just silence. Always each other. People ask me now if I regret slowing down. If I miss the constant grind, the drive, the hustle. And the truth is, not for a second. Because in that theater, under those lights, sitting in the front row, I found my heart. Not the kind that beats for profit or ambition. The kind that feels. The kind that waits. The kind that watches a woman step on stage and realizes, this is the story I've been waiting to live. Not just the final act. But the whole, beautiful play.